Hi, this is Paul Morris. Thanks for taking the time to review my assignments. The question this time: language learners should be exposed only to the forms they are taught. For many teachers, and indeed learners, this seems a quite reasonable proposition, that introducing material which is in forms the learner has not already mastered risks confusing and demoralizing the learner. Certainly this model of a phased introduction of material in line with the forms learnt is one which will be very familiar to those like myself who learnt English, or rather to read English, in the 1960s. Many who grew up in England, like myself, will be familiar with the Janet and John series of books for young children. Now, in retrospect, this might seem extremely tedious, repeating the same basic forms and a very limited vocabulary. However, I recall at the time the pleasure I got as a young child from being able to read material and understand it. As we can see, even as content became slightly more complex, the basic model of using established forms and featuring lots of repetition continued to be central to the book's design. Now, obviously, we're mainly talking about adult learners, so the extent to which we can use these parallels is somewhat more limited. In particular, adult learners are far more likely to have exposure to written material outside of the classroom. Since we as teachers encourage our learners to explore material outside the classroom, it would be wholly unrealistic to think that we could limit their exposure to content only in the form they'd learnt. Now, it could be argued that introducing material of too high a level of complexity early in a learning process risks moving learners out of that zone of proximal development, or the I+1. But in practice, it's really difficult to see how you can avoid the issue for those living in an English-speaking country, or even for those students who are actively seeking opportunities to learn outside the classroom. Therefore, I think it's probably best to introduce materials in the classroom which are more challenging, in the expectation that the students won't fully understand the content at the first readings. Rather than being an obstacle, this should be seen as a challenge, and should also help students to see that even early in a learning experience they can get some meaning from the material. There should always be a reassurance, however, that the anticipation is not that they would fully understand the material at the outset. In this way we can avoid risk of demoralizing the students or giving them unrealistic expectations.